What up, wizards? It's Dev, SPMTG. We like it at Magic, and I am still aspiring to one day be a Commander player just like you. Problem is, though, you see, and you can probably relate to this, I keep running into this thing where they want money for cards. Like, way too much money, too. I don't have any of that. So we've already done the top 10 budget commanders that haven't been done to death. You haven't seen that one, check it out after this. But today, we're going to continue to kind of dip our toes into Commander while spending as little money as possible and talk about the top 10 budget replacements for Commander staples. You have never seen a video like this before in your life. Disregard all other videos that may seem similar to this video. I am 3 years late to this party, and I've never gotten to do a video like this, so we finally get to today. Let's roll the intro. Why am I still babbling? And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech. Oh my God, we're back again. Look, I have to go ahead and admit right at the beginning here that I lied to you like 10 seconds ago, something like that, when I said you've never seen a video like this before. You probably have. There have been a whole bunch. So just like the last time we did a budget Commander video, I'm going to try to do 10 things that haven't been just run into the ground by YouTubers doing videos like this. So let's go ahead and get things started here with number 10. We have to replace Ristic Study, a classic exercise, isn't it? I remember when Prophecy was the second worst set of all time behind Homelands. That's what people said about it. But every set, even the worst ones, have their hitters, and Prophecy is a pretty good example of that. Ristic Study is $35. That's ridiculous. A lot of money for a card. It's just a card. I don't get it. But either way, this has a bunch of replacements. By now, you're probably conditioned for me to say the fish, Mystic Remora, because you've seen that like a million times. And so I'm not going to say the fish. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to say, have you thought for a second about Verity Circle? Right now, you can get a Verity Circle for about 1/200th or something of what you can get. Am I doing math correctly here? Of what you can get a Ristic Study for. It's all of 15 cents to pick up a Verity Circle. And yeah, I know it says that other than attacking, you get to draw a card when creatures tap. It turns out that's what they tap for the most. Dev, you dummy. Yeah, I know, but a lot of creatures in Commander tap for activated abilities, especially mana-producing abilities. And obviously, this lets you tap the creatures down if you have enough mana. You can also play other tapping effects if you want to, but don't fill your deck with bad cards. Just general piece of advice. However, there's plenty of other ways that you can set about actually tapping other creatures down without playing bad cards. But even if you don't devote any slots to actually making Verity Circle work, it's probably going to draw you a bunch of cards over the course of the average Commander game, because again, people love them activated abilities and tapping little dorky guys for mana and stuff. People love doing that, so you're probably going to draw a buttload, again, scientific term, a buttload of cards off of a Verity Circle. Give it a shot. Actually, one more thing on this card. I feel like I have to address this before I move on, because you're very perceptive. I know you. You're already in the comments section typing something like, hey, Dev, this does not really do what a Ristic Study does. What are you, dense? To which I say, yes, I have quite a lot of mass. Thanks for noticing. It's not really that hard to notice, but I will also answer that by doubling down on the fact this video has been done 1,000 times by 1,000 different YouTubers, and that's probably a conservative estimate. So I got to do a little bit of digging when it comes to replacing some of these things. I could just again say Mystic Remora and call it a day, but I don't want to do that to you. But forget all that, and let's move. Well, don't forget it. Remember that Verity Circle is a cool card, but let's move on to number 9. Let me say, if you did want a card that's exactly like the card we're replacing, David, imaginary person that I've made up who's complaining about my content, that's what being a YouTuber will do to you. But if you do want a card that is just like the card we're replacing, maybe you try Reforge the Soul. Now, this is a Wheel of Fortune. It doesn't look as cool as Wheel of Fortune. Almost nothing does. So Wheel of Fortune looks awesome. I'll give you that. And you also don't get to do like Wheel of, but don't. That annoys your friends anyway. Maybe don't do it when you do cast an actual Wheel of Fortune. But if you're casting Reforge the Soul here, you're basically just casting Wheel of Fortune. It just costs a couple of extra mana, with the caveat being that if it's your first draw for the turn, it actually costs less than a wheel. This is the most expensive budget replacement that we'll look at in this video at a whopping $5, which honestly is still kind of a lot to me for a piece of cardboard, right? I don't want to spend $5 on you, but you're replacing a card that is $250. Or thereabouts. And you kind of have to be just lucky enough to have owned a wheel in 1996 to still have one. Or maybe you're filthy, disgusting rich. It's entirely possible. I don't want to take that away from you. But most of us are not. And we can't pay $200+, almost $3 in some cases, for a revised Wheel of Fortune. And I will gladly pay $5 to have effectively the same thing. Let's scoot on over to number 8 real quick, y'all. We're going to look at Terror of the Peaks. This is a card that I just really like a lot. Big fan of this card. But the problem is it's like $30. Like, it's getting up there in heuristic study territory at this point. So we probably have to replace that. Good news I have for you, though, on that end. Easily replaceable for just like $1. Now, there's a couple of ways to replace this. There's an oldie but a goodie that a lot of people already know about from Exodus. I hope I got that right. It's called Pandemonium. This is just like $1 to pick up a copy of this card right now. And if you want the original one from Exodus, it's only like $3, which in my opinion is a steal for this effect. Now, it is symmetrical, which is a thing that you're going to have to deal with, just letting you know. So you keep that in mind. If you want an effect that's maybe not going to kill you when you put it on the table, you could always try Warstorm Surge instead. It might be a little bit more expensive in terms of the mana cost and all that, but again, it's Commander. Just like I don't mind paying $5 for a Wheel of Fortune, I don't mind paying this much for a Terror of the Peaks, because Terror of the Peaks is already kind of expensive. And this can't be like removed by a Doomblade. They don't Doomblade enchantment, so that's kind of nice. Now, people play plenty of like artifact and enchantment removal, but it is, I guess, conventional wisdom. It's like slightly harder to remove an enchantment. So I guess you got that going for you on this card too. There are plenty of ways to reanimate Terror of the Peaks. Fewer ways to reanimate this, but still some. I think it's kind of important. So just an all-around sweet little card. And again, it's Commander. If you have to pay an extra mana or two for a card, like big whoop, right? Famous last words, put it on my tombstone. But most Commander metas are a little bit slower. Not everybody plays EDH with like the $2,000 decks or whatever. A lot of people are playing in the kind of like local meta that you can do stuff like this, and it's probably fine if you want to replace a card you don't want to spend $40 on. But for number 7, I just need a minute of your time for a walk. Let's try and replace these effects. Obviously, Time Walk is the one, but even stuff like Time Warp will cost like $12. And that new capture of Jingzhou that just got reprinted, was originally printed in P3K, Portal 3 Kingdoms. It's like $300, but now it's reprinted in Commander Masters. They still want $20 for it. So like these Time Walk effects are pretty pricey almost no matter what you're thinking about playing. But there's at least 1 or 2 or 3, but really 1 Time Walk effect that almost like nobody thinks to play, and it's actually theoretically better than all these time warps and stuff. Let's talk for a second about Walk the Aeons, why don't we? Why doesn't anybody, for that matter? Back in the day when this card was in Standard, my buddy had a deck with like 4 copies of this card in it. It was actually super freaking annoying, and I hadn't really thought about this card for 16 years, something like that, 15, 16 years. But when I was thinking about how to replace Time Walk effects, the little MTG Rolodex that you can't help is in your brain and you can't replace, even if you wanted to actually have useful information in there. The little MTG Rolodex was like, what about that card your buddy used to play like 15 years ago? What was that called? Oh yeah, it's Walk the Aeons. This card is actually sick. It only costs 1 more mana. You'll see that that's kind of a theme today, is that some of these cards cost a mana, literally 1 or 2 mana more than their counterparts that we're replacing. But in some cases, like this one, you get a much more powerful effect. Like, not only is this taking an extra turn after this one, but you can buy it back. Like, come on, man. Sacrifice 3 islands. Is that really that big of a deal? It's Commander. Are we going to limit our imaginations at like, oh, well, it costs 6 mana, so when you cast it, you sack 3 islands to buy it back, and then you only have 3 mana. Like, no, you don't. You got way more mana than that. Even if you sack the 3 islands, man. We're in a format with all kind of crazy mana rocks and stuff like that. You can cast this, buy it back, cast it again, like super duper easy, especially in the late game. So, I don't know, man. Like, we've had Time Walk effects that were so powerful they exile themselves. This not only doesn't exile itself, it actually wants you to play it over and over. I'm sorry to advocate for being the most annoying person at the table, but like, did you know this card existed? You really should. It's only like $1.50 right now. Go get this card. Number 6, another classic Commander conundrum. How does one replace a Bitter Blossom? It's about $12 to pick up a Bitter Blossom right now, which isn't too bad, but there are plenty of ways to replace this card. Again, you may be conditioned at this point in your life to think I'm just going to throw Dreadhorde Invasion at you, but that card's like $3. That's too much to spend when you could just spend 15 cents on a Ghoulish Procession. A Ghoulish Procession. It's a good Magic card here. All right, so let's go ahead and acknowledge the negatives. Let's be fair here, right? First of all, I get that this isn't guaranteed to proc the way Bitter Blossom is, but we'll get to that in a second. The actual real suck here is that Bitter Blossom makes flying tokens that can block almost anything, whereas the decay tokens can't block literally anything at all, ever. So that is a massive source of suck when it comes to comparing these two cards. But back on that thing about how it's not guaranteed to proc every turn, may be true, yes, but it's also true that this can proc like 4 times per turn cycle. You know, once on your turn, their turn, their turn, their turn, back to your turn. So this can actually make more tokens than a Bitter Blossom, like actually kind of easily. Like creatures do die in combat, other creatures point removal, or other players point removal spells at other creatures and stuff like that. So just by like the normal process of playing Commander, you're going to get a bunch of tokens off of this. See, if you're playing something like Aristocrats or something like that really only cares about warm bodies, well, they could even be cold bodies. It really only cares about bodies on the table, period, to sacrifice or get some sort of value off of. Maybe you have something that cares about tokens or creatures entering the battlefield and it triggers off of that. Then Ghoulish Procession is actually in a lot of ways a better card than Bitter Blossom, even though it's, 1/10 of the price, something like that. So just try this card out in your Commander decks if you haven't, especially if you dig sacrificing dudes. This card is actually really good. Number 5 is a rite of passage, just like some of these other ones have been. It's Dockside Extortionist. Yeah, it's Dockside. There's probably kind of no way to replace this. Let me just go ahead and get out in front of this thing right here. There's nothing with an effect even close to this broken when it comes to creating treasure tokens. Why they print this card? I don't know. I think that's the actual answer, is get a time machine and go back and just knock whoever's thinking about printing this card over their head, right? And just shallow grave, you're done with it. Don't actually do that. If you do invent time machine technology, just use it for good. I think that's probably the thing to be doing instead. But one way or the other, it's $50. Who can afford $50 for a Dockside Extortionist? Tell you what you can't afford, though. You can afford 10 cents for a Guild Artisan. Now, I'll remind you, I already set this up, but I feel like I should qualify it again for some reason. Double qualifier. Nothing is as good as a Dockside Extortionist. And I've given you enough time to read this card if you've never read it, and you're like, that's not as good as a Dockside. I know. I totally get it. We're replacing a $50 piece of cardboard with a 10 cents piece of cardboard. That's got to mean something, right? This can produce 2 treasure tokens the turn it comes into play. Not as much as a Dockside Extortionist, but it is repeatable, right? Your commander doesn't even have to actually get in for combat damage or anything. It just has to attack the right player. You get 2 treasure tokens. It happens again next turn. The next turn, I know I'm living in Christmas land, but this can produce up to like 4 or 6 treasures for you, I think kind of easily, actually. So if you haven't tried this out, it's actually from like a really, really recent set. So you've either read the crap out of it a lot and you just don't care, or you've never once seen it, or it got lost in the hype of spoiler season or whatever. So all those things could have happened, and you're just not really aware of Guild Artisan. Again, not as good as a Dockside Extortionist, but 2 treasures the turn it comes into play potentially, and then more after that, I think is a pretty good bounty and something that you actually need to take a look at. Number 4, I will go ahead and admit, is I think the most cliched one on the list. I was in a card shop the other day for the first time in a while. I was buying Pokemon cards, believe it or not. Shout out to Atomic Gaming, by the way. They didn't ask me to do that, and I didn't say I was going to do that. But if you're in Macon, check out Atomic Gaming. Those guys are really, really nice. But in any case, I was in that card shop talking to a buddy of mine, Rob. Shout out to Rob as well. Hey, Rob. But I know you're watching this one. You watch all my Commander stuff. So what's up, bud? But you were telling me about good old Deflecting SWAT. Now, I had not heard of this card, because I'm not a Commander player. I know all the Commander players are like, you haven't heard of Deflecting SWAT, Def? Yeah, I'm not a Commander player. Have you heard of Obscure Standard card? That's actually not a fair comparison. Not even close. But in any case, actually way easier to keep up with Standard cards because there's only like 7 of them at a time. I'm babbling. Why am I bringing up this card? It's because me and Rob talked about it for a while. I only just learned of its existence yesterday afternoon, right? So I go home, I look it up, and I'm like, oh, this card's ridiculously expensive. I didn't realize, I didn't know this card was like that. So I quickly set out trying to find replacements for it and ended up finding Bolt Bend after about 40 minutes of looking through Scryfall stuff. And then before I come to record this video, I look at a bunch of articles. After I've already got my list done, I look at a bunch of articles to see sort of what people are talking about on this subject. It turns out like everyone's talked about Bolt Bin. Like everyone who's ever written an article on this has talked about Bolt Bin. I didn't know that. I worked hard to find this card and it's going to be on my list. Now I'll freely admit, like I have to with every single one of these entries, there's always something, isn't there? This costs a mana. It's not free. It isn't free. And there's a condition on it. Oh my goodness. It's also less than $1. It is less than $1 for this. Go look up Deflecting SWAT. But ooh, wait, Boy, that's a dead giveaway. There's a coffee break coming, isn't there? Whenever I make like a little noise, like, "Whoo, boy!" Let me tell you, you know what's happening. So let's go ahead and get to it. I am tired from looking up Bolt Bend and then finding out that everybody already knew about it. That'll take something out of you. So I think I need a little coffee break. This week on the coffee break, number 3 on this list, which consists of multiple cards. Hooray! Another rite of passage when determining what are some budget replacements for Commander staples is Heroic Intervention. This is a thought exercise that many people have done, and therefore many other people already know about cards like Rapid Vigor, which is very similar to a Heroic Intervention, but only costs about $1 right now and is in the correct color combination. However, many other colors get access to cards like Heroic Intervention and Teferi's Protection if you also want to replace that card. There are things like Rootborn Defenses in white that only cost 30 cents right now. They're actually a great deal when it comes to protecting your guys. Many people also know about Lazotep Plating, which only costs 50 cents and is a blue way to protect your guys and give them all hexproof, including yourself, until end of turn, which is a unique effect that can save a lot of things in a game of Magic. But my favorite of these, and probably the most obscure, is Dark Dabbling. This saves one of your creatures for just 2 mana at instant speed. However, if you have Spell Mastery, that's 2 instants or sorceries in your graveyard, it becomes a Rapid Vigor in black, a color that does not have that much access to effects like this in the first place. Dark Dabbling also just happens to be the least expensive of all of these options, at only 10 cents, which means the community at large has very likely not caught on to the fact that this is just a black Heroic Intervention. Go pick this card up. That's all for the coffee break this week. Now back to the big sexy banana man for the top 2. Oh, you know I'm the damn man. I got the feeling, big sexy banana man, because I'm appealing. Hey, I'm just practicing for freestyling. Hey, everybody. Number 2, what is it? Sensei's Divining Top. This one is expensive. I'm still very embarrassed that you caught me, but one way or the other, but this is a good card. Good Magic card. But did you know that you can also replace this like $20-something card, $20 card, professional YouTuber, with $1? You know, $1 is all you need to replace maybe one of the absolute best artifacts of all time. The caveat is that it's not an artifact. You actually just have to be playing blue if you want to play Soothsaying, but I think that it's probably worth it. And don't hit me too hard on this one, like not in the face and all that stuff, but this is another one that is theoretically like situationally better than the card it's replacing. Let me start dodging tomatoes and shoes and stuff. But look, here's my point. This is always going to cost way more. Unless you're looking at precisely one card, it's going to cost more mana to activate than a Sensei's Divining Top, which only really costs 1 mana. That's pretty awesome, right? Good job, Sensei. You're a good card. Nobody's debating that. This one, however, once you have all the mana in the world, this is a game of Commander. I assume that will eventually happen. Everyone gets infinite mana eventually, right? That's my, from an outside, I don't play all the Commander in the world perspective. That is kind of my read on the subject. And honestly, I've learned that from the comments section. It's like every time I say, well, this costs 1 million mana, is it really good in Commander? People in the comments are like, you sweet summer boy, you little man, you don't even know. So I assume that means that everyone is always going to have all of the mana all of the time at some point in the game when you're playing Commander. So when that does happen, you can pump like 7 mana into this at the end of your opponent's turn or something, and look at the top 7. If they all suck, then you just like shuffle your deck, which does cost, again, kind of a lot to do that. But you still have the option. If all of this crap on top is crap, then you can uncrap it by shuffling for a commitment. But hey, again, it's Commander. Can I just use the exact same excuse? You've got 5 mana. You've got 35 mana. That's how some people make it sound. I'm making myself laugh, and you probably shouldn't do that when you make a YouTube video unless it's exactly the thing that you should be doing. I'm not actually sure. But one way or the other, I think that Soothsaying is definitely something you want to look at, not only to replace Divining Top, but in some cases to be like a redundant effect with Divining Top. Late in the game, it can actually see more cards, which I think is really valuable. But here we are, everybody. I am so proud of you. We have made it to number 1. We have to replace Yagomus Will, and this is another one where you might be a little conditioned by the YouTube people to think I'm just going to say Underworld Breach, call it a day, start dusting my hands off and just leave. But no, Underworld Breach is like $12 too. That card's gotten a little bit out of control, and honestly, we're kind of replacing it with this entry, because if you haven't ever read Past in Flames, it is kind of an incredible replacement for cards like this. Printed in, I believe, the original Innistrad set, if I'm not mistaken, so it's not super old, but it's also not super new, right? I know that Innistrad was a really popular set, but I still feel like when it comes to Commander playables, this is kind of a lost era of Magic the Gathering in some ways, right? So just a sweet little card, man. It's only instants and sorceries. Also, shut up, don't care. And 75 cents ain't bad when a Yagomus Will is like $1.75. By the way, I mean $175 when I say $1.75. But, you know, Underworld Breach is like $10, $11 too at the least. So paying 75 cents for a card like Past in Flames, it's going to do most of the stuff you want to do with those cards anyway, I think is a really good deal. That's more or less it, Ski Lewitsky. We don't have a whole lot more to talk about today, but if you did want some more content, I'll leave a link in the description to that top 10 budget commanders that haven't been done to death. That's a fun video if you haven't seen it yet. Aside from that, you can check me out on Twitch playing some Magic, link in the description, or you can support us on Patreon, which really helps, and I need because I'm constantly broke. It's hard to live. So if you have an extra $1 a month, link in the description, it'll really help out. And you get to vote on content. That's why we're doing this video. The patrons wanted to see it. I wanted to do it. So we're a team, yeah. But anyway, aside from that, I guess we have to do the couch card of the day. What's it going to be? Was it going to be Iceman? Let's just pick it real quick. What's this? Oh, nice. Okay. Everyone should know this card. It is a Lana War Elves, ladies and gentlemen, the old school Anson Maddox art, where you can't really tell what's going on, like with his head. Not really. I guess, I'm not sure. He looks angry. I don't know, but one way or the other, it's the old school. It's an unlimited Lana War Elves. That's a nice little pull right there. Sleeve you up. You're cool. But actually, are you unlimited? No, this one's revised. I think this one is revised. I'm fairly certain this is actually revised. It can be tough to tell sometimes, but that's definitely a piece of Magic history. Just a 1-mana green dude. You tap him for a green mana. Doesn't look powerful, is insanely powerful. But that's all we've got for this one, y'all. So do all the stuff, like it, subscribe it. If you haven't subscribed it yet, I'd like for you to subscribe it. But that's about all I've got. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love. I'm coming, chicken. I'm coming. She wants out at the very end of the... I'm coming. There's Higby. Everybody, you guys can't wait 3 more seconds. Spread love and be kind.